Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this PhD defense. The right to authorize universities to award doctoral degrees rests with the government, and the Norwegian University of Life Sciences has been granted such authorization. According to the statutes given by the University Board, a PhD degree shall qualify a person for research and other academic activities, requiring high scientific competence. The aim of a doctoral study is to develop skills in independent research work, covering both in-depth studies in a specific area, as well as in broader subjects. PhD candidates should be able to relate their knowledge to the wider scientific community and to society in general. Furthermore, candidates must demonstrate the ability to communicate scientific knowledge, not only with other experts, but also with students at all levels and preferably with public at large. The PhD degree is awarded upon fulfillment of 4 requirements. A completed program of theoretical courses, a scientific PhD thesis approved for public defense, and approved public lecture on a prescribed topic, a public defense of thesis. The candidate today, Kashif Saeed Khan, was born in Pakistan on the 25th of April in 1982. He obtained the master degree in development studies at UNB in 2009. Kashif's doctoral study plan at UNB was approved in October 2010. All the courses are completed as defined in the slide. The title of the thesis is Conflict, Livelihoods, and Local Perspectives of Peace Building in Post-9/11 Northwest Pakistan. The main supervisor has been Associate Professor Engineering Paul. There has also been several key supervisors. Among those today are present Dari Susavik and Espen Sjøstad. The evaluation committee consists of first opponent, Dr. Armstrong, Deputy Director, Christian Michelsens Institute in Bergen, with a long-term research experience both from Pakistan and Afghanistan. Second opponent is Associate Professor Bahadur Nawal, Head of Department at the Department of Development Concepts Institute of Information Technology in Bhopal, Pakistan. Internal member and chair of the committee is Professor Retired, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research at UNB. Thesis has been approved for public defense by the examination committee, hence we are gathered here today. The program for today is as follows. A doctoral candidate will give a 45 minutes lecture over a prescribed topic, followed by a 15 minutes break. Then, provided the lecture is approved by the examination committee, the doctoral candidate will give a 30 up to 45-minute orientation about the scientific work. This will be followed by the public defense, the thesis that will last for up to 2 hours. Please note that this is a public defense. This means that anyone in this room is allowed to raise objections or critical comments to the thesis and its defendant. If you wish to do so, please notify me during the break after the lecture, and I'll take time after the 2 appointed opponents. Spontaneous comments during the defense are not accepted. Kashif will now first present the lecture. To what degree can a liberal peace-building approach be applied? To what degree can a liberal peace-building approach be applied in Pashtun society in in the northwest Pakistan. Rashid, yours.
Welcome everybody, and many thanks for turning up at my trial lecture. The title of my trial lecture is "To what degree can a liberal peace-building approach be applied in the Pashtun society in northwestern Pakistan?" What I'm going to try to cover through this lecture is, first of all, the contents of the lecture include, first of all, looking through what does liberal peace building mean with relevance to conflict-affected contexts. Secondly, I'm going to talk through about the structural features and organization of the Pashtun society. And then thirdly, we will explore the current context of northwestern Pakistan, which basically involves a conflict-affected society. And then lastly, we explore, after breaking down and deconstructing the context of liberal peace building and the Pashtun society, then I will explore the potential application for a liberal peace building approach in Pashtun societies in northwestern Pakistan. Firstly, the background of liberal peace and liberal peace building. Liberal peace building basically dates back to the ideas of when liberalism and liberalist ideas gained root in Europe. And it's basically traced to 17th century Europe, when liberal ideas gained root in relation to protection of individualism and in relation to equality and rights of communities and rights of the individual. How is liberal peace building, how does liberal peace building influence current contexts? Firstly, liberal peace proponents, they claim that countries that subscribe to liberal thinking and liberal ideas, they will never go to war with each other, and therefore liberalism and liberal peace, it enables societies to become peaceful and to mutually coexist with each other. The foundation of liberal peace basically rests on the fact that commercial prosperity, it will keep the incidence of war in check. And along with that, it also emphasizes democratic values, human rights, equality, which are notions which every human being aspires and which every human being will necessarily agree with. The stated goals of liberal peace building in conflict-affected societies. Firstly, it is to promote democracy and market-based economies and reforms of institutions in conflict-affected contexts. Secondly, like I said, naturally it contributes positively towards international security and peace. Developing countries in the south, they are often seen by countries in the West where liberal ideas and liberal peace building gained its roots. They are often seen as more susceptible to conflict because they are seen as having institutions and societies which necessarily don't lead to equality and don't safeguard fundamental human rights. So in a conflict-affected context, liberal peace building would naturally involve donor strategies that would seek transformation in relation to economic, political liberalization of those areas. Development assistance in conflict-affected areas, it often reduces incidences of civil war in relation through application of economic aid, military and political measures. The approach is also connected to the Winning Hearts and Minds campaign, which basically emphasizes winning hearts and minds of populations in conflict-affected areas. And naturally, through this approach, it seeks to keep incidences of radicalism and extremism in check. This primarily relates to Iraq, Afghanistan, and also other countries. And I'm quoting here Fisher, Hoffman, Richmond, and others. The other aspect of liberal peace is that it often leads to simplistic notions and linkages between conflict and development. It looks at conflict, and it looks at the development discourse often looks at post-conflict rebuilding in terms of linear strategies such as clear, hold, build, and transfer. The development aspect includes a stated aim to secure livelihoods of conflict-affected population. The World Bank, it is one of the primary institutions which deals with conflict-affected areas, and it basically sees development as an instrument for conflict-affected regions to escape the conflict trap. Examples of liberal peace building, they include countries and cases such as Bosnia, Rwanda, Kosovo, and East Timor, where they've been practiced to a relative degree of success. The different types, now we come to the different types and the different manifestations of liberal peace building. Liberal peace building is basically categorized in relation to conservative, orthodox, and emancipatory graduations and types within the liberal peace framework. For example, Richmond, Goodhand, and Newman, they basically categorize liberal peace according to the practices it carries out in conflict-affected societies. Firstly is the conservative approach. The conservative approach to liberal peace building, it basically involves application of military force in conflict-affected societies, and it's a top-down approach towards peace building and development. It is based on coercive means and is often seen as hegemonic and is sometimes seen as using force and by application of conditionalities and dependencies. The World Bank and the US led unilateral state-building efforts in countries such as Iraq, Afghanistan, amongst others. They are often charged with implementing a conservative form of liberal peace in these areas. And it is often seen as leading to militarization of peace, and in its severe form, it is often seen as leading to a hyper-conservative model, which is informed by the victor's peace, and which basically involves subduing its opponents. Primarily in Iraq and also in Afghanistan, we've seen that for the last 10-11 years. Then secondly, the orthodox model. The orthodox model of liberal peace, it is in relation to the conservative model, it is sensitive to local ownership and culture, but it is still determined to transfer the methodologies, objectives, and norms of liberalism, which is the liberal society, into conflict-affected contexts through the liberal peace framework. It is, however, seen as being more balanced, multilateral, and state-centric peace, and it is led by the United Nations and international organizations and the INGOs, which often operate alongside the UN in post-conflict contexts. It represents both bottom-up and top-down approaches, and examples include East Timor, South Sudan, and other African countries and contexts. Examples of the orthodox model basically are predominantly they are related to the UN's families of practices of peace building and governance, which basically started following the Cold War, following the end of the Cold War, and has culminated in sovereignty of the UN over East Timor. It must be pointed out over here that both the conservative and the orthodox approaches towards liberal peace building, they assume a technical superiority of the promoters and of the funders of liberal peace towards its subjects in conflict-affected contexts. Then thirdly, the emancipatory model of liberal peace. The emancipatory model of liberal peace, it is basically based in consent and greater local ownerships of liberal peace building and of approaches towards post-conflict development in conflict-affected societies. The emancipatory model is mostly critical of coerciveness and conditionalities and dependencies, which, like we explained earlier, in the conservative model and in the orthodox model, are a dominant feature. The emancipatory model, unlike the other two models, it is based mostly in bottom-up approaches, and it is enshrined in needs-based activities and stronger concerns for social justice. In emancipatory contexts, the INGOs and state donors, it must be mentioned, are not as assertive as they are particularly in the Orthodox case. Examples of emancipatory model in contemporary settings are few, but they include cases such as Kosovo, which is slightly different than other post-conflict and post-conflict contexts. Now, liberal peace building in conflict-affected contexts. Firstly, it is clear that different versions of liberal peace, including conservative, orthodox, and the emancipatory models, they contradict and undermine each other. Most contemporary peace building, they are largely placed between the conservative and the orthodox approaches. The different promoters of the liberal peace, like we mentioned earlier, the UN, the US, and the NGOs. The UN, out of this, basically it focuses mostly on the orthodox model, which is both bottom-up and top-down. And it also provides the United Nations with much legitimacy, which it often requires in conflict-affected contexts. The US, in relation to its practices, has mostly been concerned with the application of conservative models, and also it funds the orthodox graduations within the liberal peace framework. It must, however, be mentioned that the United States remains the greatest contributor in relation to financial means for funding the liberal peace agenda. Lastly, the NGOs, they mostly tend to focus on the orthodox models, as well as major donors such as Britain, France, Canada, Japan, and Norway, which basically are mostly tailored towards orthodox approaches, and then also in some cases they shore up emancipatory tendencies within conflict-affected societies. Now, after giving you an overview of liberal peace building, the definitions, and how it is relevant to conflict-affected societies, now I will try to deal with the Pashtun society and unpack the particular context of this lecture. The Pashtun society, it's basically, Pashtuns, they are referred to as the largest tribal and segmented lineage society in the world, according to Lindholm. Maintenance of ethnic identity, it remains a central goal for Pashtuns, and they are identifiable in relation to their tribes, sub-tribes, and other lineages to the very bottom. The Pashtun society, the Pashtuns, they basically inhabit western sections and western areas on the Indus River in Pakistan. And they subscribe to customary structures and social codes, most notably the Pashtun Wali, which encompasses their cultural and social aspects of life. And this also enables differentiating the Pashtuns from non-Pashtuns within Pakistan and also in Afghanistan. The Pashtun Wali, which is their social and cultural code, it basically has three pillars. Firstly, manhood. Secondly, honor. And thirdly, matters relating to social order and households, including land and financial settlements. The jirga, it is a central pillar of the Pashtun society because it is a governance mechanism, and in addition to being a governance mechanism, it is a conflict resolution mechanism which basically deals with conflicts between individuals and also between ethnic groups and sub-ethnic groups in the Pashtun areas. The Pashtun social order, it is divided into four factions. Firstly, the Khans, who are also the landlords. Then the tenants, who basically till the lands for the Khans. And then thirdly, the Kasabgars, which is the working class. And lastly, the Maulvis, who basically belong to the religious clergy. The government of Pakistan in the northwest has historically solicited support from the jirgas throughout its history for dealing with conflicts and for matters in relation to day-to-day affairs. However, in relation to the Pashtun society, it is central that social structures in the area, they started experiencing changes in the late 70s and in the early 80s, particularly because of the war in Afghanistan, when the region was used as a launching pad and as a base to carry out activities in neighboring Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. Here's a map of northwestern Pakistan. The white includes the federally administered tribal areas, and this is basically the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, which basically consists of which compose northwestern Pakistan. Northwestern Pakistan is different than other areas of Pakistan because it basically has experienced and continues to experience three different types and forms of governance systems. Firstly, it has settled districts, which, like other areas and other districts of Pakistan, are similar to other areas. Secondly, the provincially administered tribal areas, which lie between the settled districts and the federally administered tribal areas. And then thirdly, the agencies in FATA, which basically are districts in FATA, and they follow tribal forms of governance and are directly administered under the president through his agent, who is the governor. Characteristics of the area, they include a historical neglect of the area, and which also these different types of governance system, it is pretty evident that it manifests a lack of coherence of the Pakistani state in meeting the governance challenges in the northwest of the country. Now, the current context of northwestern Pakistan, the important aspects. First of all, it has undergone a protracted conflict. Secondly, it was also affected by a super flood, which has basically led to serious repercussions for communities in the area. Just to say a few, the industrial units in northwestern Pakistan, they decreased between 2000 and 2009 from 3,500 to 600. And it must be appreciated that in the same period, the population probably increased by a third. So you can assess the problems which the local communities have had to face in terms of access of jobs and employment opportunities, and also loss of their livelihoods. Then there has been, like I said, a huge flood, and the losses of the flood, they amount to 1.17 billion US dollars. The conflict damages for infrastructure alone are estimated to be $0.87 billion, which are basically in addition to those of the floods. So these things, they give you an insight. These are some of the features which basically gives you an insight of the context in northwestern Pakistan, the current context, that it is a heavily conflict-affected society, and the problems they have been aggravating, particularly recently. Now, how liberal peace-building approaches they've been practiced in relation to these problems in the northwest. Like I mentioned, and as is evident, that the area has suffered huge humanitarian crises, including the conflict and the floods. So the humanitarian responses, they are basically used by proponents and proposers of liberal peace to carry out humanitarian interventions and responses in northwestern Pakistan. In terms of its application, there has been a mix of both the conservative and the orthodox approaches. The conservative approaches are manifested by military operations of the Pakistani military, which in most cases does these operations at the bidding of the United States, which of course has led to huge humanitarian suffering in the area. In addition, there are also continued drone strikes by the United States in the border areas, which also lead to significant levels of anger amongst the local population. The humanitarian and the development responses in the area, they have been met through different plans, such as the Pakistani Humanitarian Response Plan of 2009 following the conflict, and the Floods Emergency Response Plan in 2010. These plans, they basically focus on relief activities, food, NFI distributions, health, and education, amongst others. What is clear is that in many cases, these plans, they have enabled meeting the humanitarian needs to an extent in northwestern Pakistan, but there hasn't been any shift towards long-term recovery and early recovery for meeting the livelihoods and the infrastructure needs of the affected population. The implications of these plans and of these responses, firstly, primarily through the United States and the donors, they've led to a mushrooming of civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations in the Northwest. In many instances, they bypass local authorities and implant non-governmental organizations as counterweights to the local government, and in a way they carry out and they take over parallel rules of the state, which undermines the efficiency of the state itself. The UN and the donors, they fail to sufficiently consult local authorities and communities in these areas when carrying out their responses and their interventions. Some of the reasons also include that there is low credibility of local authorities and the capacity of the local authorities seems to be quite low. However, by these types of arrangements and implementation arrangements, these lead to contradictions, and these manifest contradictions in the liberal peace approaches that often increase discontent and deprivation amongst local communities, as is evident in northwestern Pakistan. Now, the potential for the application of liberal peace building approach in the Pashtun society of northwestern Pakistan. How can liberal peace building be applied in the future and can be applied potentially in this context? First of all, it is pretty evident that the Pashtun society is strongly bonded to Islam, and the Pashtuns also have a strong identity, as I mentioned earlier, the Pashtun Wali. Then secondly, the recent elections and the indicators for acceptance of liberal peace in the Pashtun society, they can be gauged by the fact that the recent elections, they have resulted in those parties coming to power which opposed the drones program and which also opposed conservative approaches towards the conflict which were pursued by the subsequent governments. So, and here you can see Imran Khan who is called basically for a changed approach towards dealing with the drone program and new approaches in carrying out concept transformation in the area. Then, historically, it has to be said that in the Pashtun society, guests were valued in the Pashtun society. However, once guests or foreigners or outside actors, they penetrated into the Pashtun society and started acting as competitors, they were challenged. So this basically also indicates that conservative and orthodox approaches that have been applied during the course of current engagements, they have led to problems and they have not been accepted by local communities. However, like I said earlier, the Pashtun society has rich customary structures and institutions, including Pashtun Wali, which basically streamlines a pretty systematic code of conduct for both Pashtuns and outsiders. So emancipatory tendencies, they do exist in Pashtun society. Liberal peace has potential in Pashtun society if donors, if they base their interventions in relation to local needs and agendas, and if they respect their codes and their cultures, I see a way forward. Engagements promoting liberal peace in addition to democracy, equality, equal rights, they should also, in northwestern Pakistan, they should support the existing institutions, including jargas and local governments, and they can complement each other. And in addition, it has to be said that potentially they can lead to greater freedoms and rights for Pashtun women if local sensitivities and aspirations are addressed accordingly. Like I said, Pashtun Wali has the potential to support emancipatory arrangements and also linkages between Pashtuns and outside actors, including proposers and proponents of the liberal peace-building framework. What does this require? What is needed from the locals, that is Pashtuns, as part of this arrangement? Firstly, greater educational opportunities are needed from within the Pashtun society so that they increase the level of awareness and sensitivity in Pashtun society. For instance, FATA, the federally administered tribal areas, has its literacy rate for women is as low as maybe 6%, and for men it is as low as maybe 35%. So the Pashtuns definitely need to improve on that. Secondly, Pashtun social codes and customary structures, they, like I mentioned earlier, they offer a degree of individual and collective rights, which is the stated goals and aim of liberal peace building in conflict-affected contexts. Thirdly, one has to recognize that individual rights, like I said, including Pashtun rights for Pashtun women, they need to be further promoted and enhanced within the Pashtun society. It must be mentioned here that existing Pakistani laws, they safeguard individual rights. However, there have been problems with proper adherence of those laws. What is needed from the liberal peace agenda and from liberal peace setters and funders, including Western states, first of all, to practice emancipatory forms of liberal peace instead of basing their interventions on conservative approaches, which have led to ramifications and are evident during the last 5-6 years or since September 2001. Secondly, they need to tailor their agendas and plans in a way that support and meet local community needs. This is what Rick Wand, who is one of the biggest thinkers of liberal peace, he refers to as a process of imposing, or the process of moving on towards a post-liberal peace agenda and towards a post-liberal peace framework. The crux of the lecture: firstly, emancipatory liberal peace is feasible in Pashtun society, provided it is enshrined in local terms. Secondly, the locals, they need to embrace this concept, since the area, it has undergone a huge conflict and lots of humanitarian crisis, and they cannot function without outside support and need that support for their critical aspects of their economy. Lastly, the agenda, it needs to ensure local ownership and better results. In addition, liberal peace is a good concept, in my opinion, and the ideas behind it are good. Equality of rights and human rights is something which every individual respects, and which Pashtuns should also respect, and which they also believe in. But it must be said that the way liberal peace building is practiced in conflict-affected societies, the problem lies in relation to how it is practiced in conflict-affected societies. In essence, Pashtun society mirrors liberal forms of equal rights based on local institutions and customary structures, which offer a ray of hope for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the lecture. The first part of the arrangement is now over, and we will have a break. The lecture was maybe a bit shorter than planned. Still, I think we can meet again here at 1:20. Is that okay? So I hope you'll be here at 20 past.